this is tricky because it has to be the Royal African Falcon top martial arts patriarchal line. There was a time long ago, perhaps, when other races could have possibly ended up replacing that line, but they didn't. Okay, and they cannot. No white Jew or LGBT patriarchal line could ever possibly be chosen by God, and no one is more against it that's ever lived on this planet than I, the top martial artist ever, because they provoked me this morning and they interfered the last time I tried to make these videos, and I have to do them in clips, etc. I say it plainly. Plus, I pronounce more judgments against them and their offspring and their ancestors, especially as they caused me cognitive damage this morning, trying to act while they're trying to act bad. Utter disgrace for them and their offspring. Can you imagine their ancestors in Egypt, the poor, sniveling peasants that they were, pretending that they were above Pharaoh? How much more dumb to do it to the top martial arts ever. Just utterly disgraced, no understanding of being a man, love, martial arts, spirituality, wisdom, intelligence, you name it. Just no understanding. They have no understanding. They don't know what they're doing, what they're talking about. You'll quickly see in this video that the scriptures and understanding the scriptures mean nothing. Obeying God's commands and being the top martial arts ever means everything. So people did not obey me in time, okay? For them to have any kind of respectable entrance into heaven, but they can still make it to heaven by the skin of their teeth if they obey me before I die and time runs out. Okay? Now, again, the wordplay of late, rate, hate, fate, mate, date comes to mind, and that is key. You turned attractive women against me. Okay, you did not obey in time, you're late. The rate of you making people evil is outrageous. The rate of your various sins, drugging, murder, etc. So now imagine these people's ancestors who are persecuting me in the spiritual realm right now, cooking, writhing in pain, screaming with all their being for their ancestors, for their offspring to stop persecuting me. So what is this fire that is burning their ancestors, their forefathers, their foremothers, their recently dead loved ones, for example? What is this fire in the spiritual realm? Well, let's discuss it. First of all, Jesus said, I came to bring a fire, and how I wish it was already kindled in the New Testament. So why would these people say, well, Jesus is this forgiving and loving guy, and that Jesus is God, and that, etc., etc., the Trinity? They're mistaken. Only the righteous are forgiven, those who turn to God and obey God through me. That's why Jesus said, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? Because it pisses off the king when people rebel. And there's countless scriptures, like in Proverbs. Fear the Lord and the king, don't join with the rebellious officials, like Psalm 2. It says, why do the people plot in vain? Why are they trying to put their despicable patriarchal alliance to sink to the level of trying to snake the most righteous person that ever lived above God's son? Why are they that stupid? Why are their brains that inferior? Why is their DNA that inferior? It pisses you off to the point where you say, I wish God's fire was already kindled right now. And that, according to their story, was 2,000 years ago. How much more now, after their sins have been piled as high as they have been? God has remembered her sins. So that's the first point. Jesus said, I came to bring a fire, and how I wish it was already kindled. The fire is aimed at the wicked. There's no other way to look at it. Point number 2, okay, Micah 1:7. It says, mountains melt and valleys split like wax before the fire. Idols are broken to pieces and burned with fire because of people worshiping other gods, prostituting themselves to other gods. What is it referring to? God comes down to do battle and mountains melt. Okay, now we'll get into these other ideas in other videos. Where I'll do a video about mountains and all kinds of things, the doves and the bows and arrows and the sword and so on and so forth. And we'll truly understand these ideas in a way that makes it crystal clear that understanding the Bible is not understanding God. Understanding martial arts, Royal African Falcon, universal pinpoint and moral precision, focus, moral intensity, natural and supernatural, divine martial arts is how you understand God, living righteousness and focus, moral intensity. I'll prove that beyond any doubt. In a sense, I already have. this first part of this video alone. Okay, now we get to point number 3. Okay, the enemies in Micah 4:12 through 13, the enemies are scattered, and they're gathered again like sheaves to the threshing floor, and Zion breaks to pieces many nations. So the enemies that were scattered, okay, are gathered like sheaves, like a bunch of wheat bundled together, okay, and they're, except for their tares, right, the tares versus the wheat, and so they're going to be thrown into the fire. Okay, so that's how that connects to the fire. Okay, it's a certain strategy that's going on. You see how people gather together in groups, right? Think about prison, whites, blacks, others, Hispanics. Think about cultural groupings, right? They've gathered together in despicable tear groupings, ripe for the fire, if you will. Pretty straightforward, right? Going on to point number 4. In Hebrews, it says the Lord is a consuming fire. Okay, we'll get to how there's differences of fires. The fire can set something on fire that, is burning in its own right, right? So basically, as God is a fire, he sets people on fire, and those people are burning, okay? And their wickedness has allowed them to be burned. Okay, so that gets confusing. So some people will get confused about this when they say, well, if God's a fire, why does Jeremiah say wickedness is a fire? And we'll get to that. Wickedness burns like a fire, okay? Which is a form of saying that wickedness is the fire. And then that would then be saying that God is wickedness, but that's not what it's saying. That's part of why I don't like the Bible. And as you see me explain this, you'll quickly start to realize if I explained it in my own words instead of reading their Bible, okay, that I'd be better off explaining what's happening if I wrote my own book straight into the point. And the disciples point that as well when they say, why don't you speak plainly to us? And Jesus is often referring to the riddles in the Torah, the Old Testament. All right. So where are we here? That's point number 4. So point number 5. Okay. Nahum, I believe it's Nahum 1. God's wrath is poured out like a fire. Okay. Also, okay, so God's wrath is poured out like a fire. This is key because we'll get later we'll get into how God searches people with lamps, and the lamp and the torch are forms of fire. Just bear with me. So again, point number 5 is Nahum 1. God's wrath is poured out like a fire. Point number 6 is Nahum 3:13. Fire has consumed the bars of her gates. So Nineveh's gates, right? This point of reference for Babylon is Nineveh. Okay, Babylon is the whole world, right? Especially America. The eagle of Rome, the eagle of Babylon, the eagle of America. Zeus in Greece depicted as an eagle. Zeus is the Greek version of Baal, the main adversary for God in the Bible, basically. Okay, Babylon, Baal, Bel, On, Ba, Bel, On. Okay, Babel, baby line, Babylon. Okay, Bible in Babel. And they have to kind of make sense of the Babel to explain to people who are fanatically fixated on understanding things through the Bible, and instead of rallying to obey God through me. By the time we're done with this video, if you don't understand why you have to obey God through me, or you're a complete idiot, okay, and even if you're agnostic, then I assure you, you are a dumbass, okay? There's no other way to look at it. It is impossible for me to be wrong about that. Impossible. This is 1 + 1 = 2 in basic arithmetic. It's just as impossible for me to be wrong about that as being wrong about this. Okay. Point number 7. Zephaniah 1:18. Okay. God said that their silver and gold can't save him from the fire of his jealous wrath. So what is this jealous wrath? This gets interesting, right? You see that God is mad that people, he's jealous. It's really not the right word, because jealous has kind of petty connotation. God is mad that people are worshiping their own strength. They look at, people in the world and say, hey, that guy's strong. Goliath's big and strong. I'm going to worship a deity that's big and strong. Look at some kind of craftsman and say, wow, he built a nice house. I'm going to worship that guy's house. They worship their own inventions and their own strength in battle instead of fighting, with the Spirit of God. Okay? And then there's Ephraim, who's jealous of Judah. And this is very key, as Ephraim is a key point of reference for Satan. All right. That's point 7. Point number 8. See, my notes are all over the place here. So, I've been working on this and finding new scriptures and printing things out and writing new things down. And, they make it hard for me to do these things because of the way they do things and deny me certain things, certain resources that I need to organize things. All right. So that was point number 7. Now point number 8. I've seen this earlier. When the heck did I put it? Point number 8, Zephaniah 3. Everyone outside the divine order sings Lord, that is. Okay. Point number 8, Zephaniah 3. Jerusalem remains unrepentant. I have destroyed nations, their strongholds are demolished. I have left their streets deserted, with no one passing through. Their cities are laid waste. They are deserted and empty. Of Jerusalem I thought, surely you will fear me and accept correction. Then her place of refuge would not be destroyed, nor all my punishments come upon her. But they were still eager to act corruptly, and all they did. Therefore, wait for me, declares the Lord, for the day I will stand up and testify. I have decided to assemble the nations, to gather the kingdoms, and to pour out my wrath on them. Oh, my fierce anger. The whole world will be consumed by the fire of my jealous anger. So there, again, is another reference to the fire of his jealous anger. So he says, why? Jealous, again, is not the right word. People interpreted this like petty fools or something. Okay, it says, why did you betray God? Right? And it's a wrath that consumes them from their inside. And we can look at people and see people acting like arrogant fools and spending all kinds of money on fancy clothes and hygiene products and saying, oh yes, I'm very hygienic, yes, I'm superior, that's other people under God's wrath. And we see that they're insane. They're among the craziest of the crazies, to think that if you pile up ill-gotten gains and you try to present yourself a certain way, then magically people are dumb enough to think that you're not under God's wrath, or magically that you're not, right? It's stupid. Okay, point number 9. In Jeremiah pointed out that God's word is like a fire in his heart, in his soul, in his being, that he can't contain it. It forces him to speak the truth. Point number 10, in Jeremiah it says that wickedness burns like a fire. Okay, so wickedness is burning them, right? God is angry at them, and as he's, mad at society, mad at the world, mad at all the humans that ever lived, except for the righteous. Those who have righteousness, I'll say, hey, I was righteous and I tried my best. It's these other clowns. Those guys are like, no, we're sorry. You see what I'm saying? That's what it's getting at. Except for when you think about it, there's no other way it could be when you look at all the points and references and what nature is telling you, for example. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why we know that there's a God. What came first, unless it was God who was powerful enough to not need to be created? Okay, there's all kinds of evidence to that effect. The patterns of nature, the stars, the sun, I can go on and on about that. I have videos about that, but let's just keep going here. So point number 11, okay, has to do with Nahum 2, okay? Basically the shields of the soldiers, Nahum 2, 3, we'll start. So the vines are ruined. Why? Why are the vines ruined? Why are they burned up like tares? Okay, the vines stand for the spirits of the nations, their families, etc. The shields of the soldiers are red. The warriors are clad in scarlet. The metal on their chariots flashes on the day they are made ready. The spears of juniper are brandished. The chariots storm through the streets, rushing back and forth through the squares. They look like flaming torches. They dart like lightning. Okay, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Lightning sometimes sets things on fire too. So flaming torches, they dart like lightning. Nineveh summons her picked troops. They stumble on their way. They dash to the city walls. The protective shields are in place. The river gates are thrown open, and the palace collapses. All right. So there you see fire right there. They look like flaming torches. The chariots. It's the spirit of the chariots look like flaming torches. Okay. This is part of why I don't like the Bible. Again, they used it in a comparison in a way that's kind of tricky and confusing. Okay. Basically, God's wrath. God is allowing these people to abuse these other people, and it makes it clear in Habakkuk. Okay. Well, I'm out of time. Let's leave it there. I'll explore it in the comments or something.